Many, if not most of you, probably have no idea what I just said. Hi, my name's Anne. I'm 18 years old, and today I'll be talking to you about the hidden language, Auslan. Now, imagine your new parents and the doctor walks in and tells you, sorry, your baby is deaf. How would you feel? Disconnected? Devastated. Your baby can't communicate with you or the world. I am telling you, it's not true. Your baby will be able to communicate and, if given the right opportunities, will succeed like any other child, thanks to the help of Australian Sign Language, Auslan. According to the Australian Network on Disability, 1 in 6 Australians are affected by hearing loss. Amongst those, 30,000 are completely deaf. This means that Australia is lucky enough to have one of the largest deaf communities in the world. Why lucky? Well, often deaf people are seen as disabled people who need help. However, I see deaf people simply as a distinct community with their own culture and language, just like any other community in Australia. If we feel lucky, the Greeks, the Italians, and the Chinese, we should feel equally as lucky to have the deaf community as part of our rich and diverse society. I remember the first time I encountered a deaf person. I was walking down the street when I saw 2 men drinking coffee while using their hands to communicate. I was so intrigued, but I didn't want to offend them or worse, embarrass myself, so I walked away. Soon after that, I decided to join a sign language class. One thing my teacher taught me that changed the way I think is that deaf culture is just like hearing culture. They have their own history, their own language. Just like we have Japanese, Vietnamese, and Spanish, they have Japanese Sign Language, Vietnamese Sign Language, and Spanish Sign Language. Sign language functions the same as spoken language. So here's my question. Why do schools teach Chinese, Italian, and even Latin, a dead language, and not Auslan? Why do we go overseas on exchange and not for a 14-minute drive to the Vic Deaf Centre where you can learn Auslan from a deaf teacher? Deaf people are in our everyday lives. Deaf bus drivers, deaf engineers, deaf students. It just doesn't make any sense to me that we're learning how to communicate with people from halfway across the world and not yet know how to communicate with our own community. Learning Auslan not only opens you up to a whole new culture, but also helps improve cognitive skills like memory and creativity. There's nothing to lose, you can only gain. So what's stopping us? According to a study done in 2013 by McGill University, auditory deprivation does not affect the development of the brain. However, not learning sign language is detrimental to that of a deaf child. The only thing that will affect deaf people is if the hearing take away their right to the same opportunity. Let me give you an example. Judith Wright, a famous Australian poet, was very successful, interestingly, I think, because she was deaf. Deaf people are more direct than hearing people. So instead of seeing it as a limitation, Wright used her deafness as an asset to portray her views directly and firmly through her poetry. She became the first Australian woman to receive the Queen's Gold Medal for poetry. If she had been forced to use a language other than her own, she would not have made history and achieved what she did. This shows that deaf people should not have to have cochlear implants or learn how to lip read just to survive in our world, because they are not a problem and needs to be fixed. Help them feel less like an alien in their own country and recognize them as an Australian, as a human, just like us. You may ask, why can't deaf people just learn to speak rather than us learning to sign? Well, it's a question that's been raised before, The Milan Conference in 1880 decided that oralism, meaning teaching deaf people to speak, was a better way to educate the deaf. So for years, deaf people were forced to sit on their hands and punished if they didn't speak. This went on all the way until the 1970s when oralism was finally declared a complete failure. Why was that? Imagine trying to teach a deaf baby to say hello. It'd take months, but how do you expect a baby to replicate a sound they can never hear? On the other hand, we have hands. I bet I can teach you how to sign hello in 3 seconds. Actually, you already know it. A lot of the signs are ingrained into our everyday body language, like hello, you, me, good. In fact, humans use gesture to communicate even before the vocal cords were developed. Can you give it a go? Hello. Good. And believe me, it's not hard. I had only been in Australia for 18 months and I'd finished 3 courses and I'd talked to over 50 people in Auslan. If I can do it, so can you. I can't sum up the culture or the language in just 8 minutes, but I hope you've become more aware of how much we neglect deaf culture and as a community need to embrace it for the true beauty that it holds. As my speech is coming to an end, I'd like to leave you with a question. Is sign language really a hidden language when it's right in front of our faces? The 30,000 deaf people in Australia have a voice. If we don't listen, they can't be heard. Thank you.